today I'm going to be tying up the Kola Bottle Tube, and I'm actually going to use the tube itself as the body. So I'm only going to tie at the rear and at the front of the tube fly. Okay, so I've just got a scarlet red floss here, and this is going to help me create a tag and a small tail, although the tail is going to be feelers. I'll talk about that later on. I'm just going to use fluorescent red floss for the tail. Okay, and just put that in. In fact, I'm going to make sure that floss doesn't slip down over the lip of the bottle tube. Okay, I'm going to use the weight of the bobbin here to tie this in, and then try and get it as clean a cut as possible, because as I said, you're not going to be going over this with tinsel or anything. Okay, and then just start building up that butt area. Okay, have a look to make sure none of the floss has slipped the far side. I'm happy enough with that there. And I'm going to shorten off this wool. You could also use the floss itself for the tail. If you have some Velcro, I'm using the scissors, but if you have some Velcro, you could also just blend out those fibres, but I'll do this later on. It doesn't really make a nice video anyway. Okay, then we're going to need our whip finish tool. Okay, and that's the rear part of the body done. Just keeping it simple for this fly. I don't want that floss to slip over the rib there, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add on a small bit of quick dry and varnish. Okay, this is the Rimmel 60 seconds I've used on the channel before, and I'm not even going to use the brush. I'm going to use a needle. Okay, it doesn't need to be a thick coat or anything like that there, just enough to stop any slippage. If you wanted, you could even varnish the body to give a brighter brass coverage, but I'm okay. I'm going to just stick to what we have. Okay, and I'll give that a wee minute to dry. Okay, once the varnish is dry, we're just going to start to add our thread to the top of the tube now. And I'm going to use red thread. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is add on a collar hackle. I could use strip fibres for a fly this small, but I prefer to just to basically tie on a hackle as normal and then sweep it back. So I've broken off the tip here. I'm going to use wax thread, and I tie in at that tip going forward a few turns, then sweep it back and tie on top again. Okay. It's important to use wax thread here because you don't have an underbody to grip, it's just brass. Okay, then I just double those fibres. As this is going to be swept, I wouldn't worry too much if not all are doubled anyway. Okay, and then just do a few turns around the tube. Okay, and then I'm just going to tie that in with the thread going forward. Okay, then we just neaten it off, and then what I want to do is I want to push as many of those fibres as I can to the underside. Don't have to get them all, you can even wet your hand if needs be, but it's just to give a good bed for the wing. I'm sure you've seen this done before for some of the, like the stoat's tail, and then I'm going to just bring my thread over that there. Okay, hopefully that'll get most of those. Okay. Next we're going to add on our wing, which is going to be black Arctic fox. Okay, and I'm just going to use the pelt here because I've got the right length here for this tube. This is only a small tube. Okay, I think this is a 12mm tube, so roughly just under half an inch or so. Now I've got a good bit of Arctic Fox here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove a lot of that underfur. Okay, an Arctic Fox always looks a bit bulkier than it actually is. Whenever it hits water, it'll thin out a lot. Okay, so just clearing that off. I'm going to do the same with the tips. I'm going to remove those. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tease out a few fibres to create a bit of a shape, as you can see here. You know, it's a bit of a taper at the wing. Okay. And then I'm going to tie this on. Length is up to yourself. Probably going to do twice the length of the tube here. I think that would probably be ideal. Okay, and because the tube with that ridge and all that, I'm going to just try and cut off what I think will be the excess. And then use my wax thread. I'm going to catch that in above with a pinching loop. Just like that there. Okay. Didn't get it all in, but I'm going to just swipe those back, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add on a little bit of super glue here. Just add on a little bit of super glue on the thread. And just wind that over the wing. If you have any rogue fibres, and just neaten up as you go along. Okay. Next I'm going to add on a little bit of flesh, so you can use some silver Angelina fibres. Okay, or you could use silver, well this is just craft fibres, you could use silver, what do you call it, angel hair for example, but I like to use this. As you can see, it's very fleshy, so I don't like to use too much of it. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a bit of a taper in the cutting. Okay, and then as you can see, that'll really taper into that wing there. Okay, another wee turn there just to set it down. As well as that, the pattern entails a little bit of red, so don't have any red craft fibre, but I do have some like red light bright, so I'm going to put a little bit of this on, not too much. I'm going to use the weight of the bobbin. Secure it in. A few turns. Okay. Just conscious that this is starting to build up a little bit, so trying to neaten things up here a little bit, okay. And that'll give you a nice tapered wing with silver and red. Okay. Finally, last thing I want to do is add on some jungle cock. So I have some prepared here. It's quite large jungle cock for this fly. Okay, and this will just go to the side of the wing. So a few turns first of all to see how we get on. Okay. Okay, on your side, I just need to make a small adjustment on my side. Okay. I've enough of that there. So what I'm going to do is, again, I like to use super glue. Give me a very durable fly. So super glue thread wraps will help secure that jungle cock in. And then I can trim off the excess. Okay, now I just need to build up the head a little bit, meet the front of the tube. Okay, there's quite a bit of fluff left over from that jungle cock, so I'm going to try and just cover the head with red, but if not, I'll probably varnish this one with red varnish at the end. There's a little bit of white fluff and stuff left over from the jungle cock. Or maybe even just use red permanent marker. Okay, then we just whip finish, and that finishes off this part of the fly. But as I said earlier, folks, there's two parts of this fly. Basically it's a tube fly, and on the tube fly you'll have at the end the junction tubing. Okay, and then at the end of the junction tubing for this fly, it actually requires you to tie on some feelers, and you'll see I have a bit of a trigger point on this one. This is just the stuff that I do for some tube flies, and I've done a video separately of these. But basically you can attach this onto the tube and it extends the length of it, and you can use feelers. You could use, this is boar bristles, but it'll help you actually build that profile up. Okay, as well as that folks, just for my tube holder anyway, I need to add on some liner tubing, but it depends what size of tube you're using. But yeah, that's it folks. That is fairly simple, fairly quick to tie Kola Bottle Tube. If you enjoyed the video, do check out the other ones coming up on screen now. Hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Until next time, thanks very much. All the best.